Hey folks, how are we doing? Just decided to make a little video on a really important topic, changing forms, linear functions, right? So in class we've learned now, or you've learned in the past, about three different forms. We've learned about slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, and in this unit we'll talk about f of x equals mx plus b, potentially. We've learned about standard form, ax plus by equals c, and remember that a and b are not supposed to be fractions, they're supposed to be whole numbers. And then we've learned about point slope form, which is y minus k equals mx minus h, and recall that m is your slope, all right, and hk is a point that's guaranteed to be on the line. Okay, and so again, like we talked in class, and this was kind of a point of confusion maybe for some of us. Observe that if I plug in h here, that will make this 0, so the whole right side will cancel out, right? H minus h is 0. And if I plug in k on the left, k minus k is also 0. And what that will do is that will effectively cancel out both sides, making those sides 0. All right, and so therefore 0 equals 0, and that is true. And what we need to remember is that a line is essentially all of the points, right? All of the x's and y's that are making a linear equation true, right? So if I pick this point, then if I plug its x and y into the equation, it needs to make the equation both sides equal to each other. Okay, and that's something we're going to get more practice with, but today what we're going to talk about mostly is the converting. Now, given any two forms, I can convert back and forth between them, right? I could go from slope-intercept to standard. I could go from point slope to standard. I could go from, or rather, point slope to slope-intercept. I could go from point slope to standard, and I can actually, if I wanted to, really go back and forth between any of these two. Today, I'm going to focus on three different types of conversions. I'm going to go from point slope to slope-intercept form, slope-intercept form to standard form, and standard form to slope-intercept form. But notice, if I want to go from point slope to standard form, well, all I have to do is go from point slope to slope-intercept, and then slope-intercept to standard. I could do that as well. So what I'll do is I'll give you an example of a problem, and then you guys will have an opportunity to try one on your own. And then at the end, I'll give you a little challenge that I hope that you can try out for me. All right, so here we go. First one is point slope to slope-intercept. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take point slope form, and I'm going to need to make it look like this. And whenever you're solving one of these, you want to think about, what is my final answer supposed to look like? It's supposed to look like this. Okay, so here's what we do. First, I'm going to do the distributing, because I essentially want to get y alone, right? So I rewrite, and now here I distribute the -2 to the x, and make sure you distribute to both things. That's times some common things that people don't do with the distribution. One of them is they only distribute to one. The other one is the sign kind of gets them a little bit stuck. And the last thing I do is I just add the 3 on both sides, and now what I get is I get y alone, okay? So if you think about this, a couple things that we might want to point out here, okay? One of them is that the slope is the same, -2, -2. The other one is if I plug in my original point, so this one was supposed to contain the point 5, 3. If I plug in 5 here, well, -2 times 5 is -10, plus 13 is +3. So you can see that if you plug in 5 for x and 3 for y, both sides of the equation are equal to each other. All right, so here's what I want you to do. Go ahead and try to do this problem, okay, right here. Convert this into slope-intercept, just like how I did this, okay? Pause the video, and then once you're ready to see me do the solution, you can go ahead and unpause, okay? So pause now and try. All right, now I'm going to show you the conversion. So here I go. This is y plus 7 equals -1/2 x minus 6. So I distribute the -1/2, distribute. All right, that gets me y plus 7 equals -1/2 x plus What's half of 6? 3. Again, the plus because the signs need to flip because it's a negative times a negative. Now I add the 7, or rather, in this case, add a negative 7 or subtract 7 to cancel, and I get y equals negative 1/2 x minus 4. Okay, again, notice the equivalent slopes, negative 1/2, negative 1/2. Notice how if I go ahead and I plug in a positive 6, so this point contains, notice this is a plus, this is a minus, this is a negative 7 because you're thinking about what will cancel out. So if you see a plus, that means it's a minus. Okay, if I plug in positive 6, this flips to a negative 3, and negative 3 minus 4 is negative 7, so you also see the point works. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead, and again, if you need to rewind the video to see that again, go ahead, but I'm going to move on to slope-intercept to standard, okay? So I want my final answer to look like ax plus by equals c. People teach this in different ways. I don't really mind if either a or b are negative, but they cannot be fractions. So what we're going to see is that if there's any fractions, we're going to need to cancel those out by multiplying by the denominator. So in this case, I'm going to do the first one. I'm going to ask you to try the second one, and then just think about that whole multiplying by the denominator thing. So here, I just need to get, see y is alone, I just need to get x and y on the same side, and again, if there's fractions, eliminate. So let's start with this. I don't like the 3x here, I need to get the 3x over, so I just subtract by 3x, subtract by 3x, okay? And I get negative 3x plus y equals negative 5, okay? Notice I want to always put the x in front of the y. I want it to look like this right here, okay? Some people say that the leading coefficient, in other words, the coefficient in front of x, cannot be positive, or rather cannot be negative, so you have to make it positive. So an equivalent way to write this is 3x minus y equals positive 5, and all I did there was I multiplied through by a negative 1 to flip this sign, and flip that sign, right? And if you multiply both sides by the same thing, you get an equivalent expression. I'm not going to be personally me. I'm not going to be so picky about that. I personally care more about can you get it into this form, x and y next to each other with the no fractions in it. But some people will have a different take towards it. So I just want to just prepare you for what you could potentially see out there. All right, so go ahead and try to do the same thing here that I just did, keeping in mind there's going to be some fractions, and think about how you'd mitigate those. And then in a few seconds, I will show you how. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to now try to convert this to standard form. So what I do is I first start by subtracting the negative 3/5 x on both sides. So I get negative 3/5 x plus y equals negative 2. Okay? And now I've got a fraction, right? So I can't have a negative. So what I'm going to do is when you see a fraction, you multiply by its denominator. Okay? And I do that on both sides because what I do to one side, I've got to do to the other. So here what I get is I distribute, and in this case the fractions cancel. I distribute, giving me 5y. Over here I multiply, giving me negative 10. Or sometimes people again will argue that x has to be positive, so you could also write 3x minus 5y equals 10. Again, these are equivalent. Either one is correct. It just depends on the conventions that people would have you follow for that one. Okay, so if you need to, go ahead, take a second and wind that back, review it. Otherwise, I'm going to now move on to the final conversion. All right, here we go. Final conversion. Wonderful. Last but not least is standard form to slope-intercept form, okay? So similarly, I want to get y alone, y equals mx plus b, and now x and y are together. So all I got to do is I've got to essentially get y alone. So in one case, that's a straightforward move over, and the other one is going to require a couple steps. I believe this should require no more than 2 steps. One to get the x on the other side, one to kind of eliminate anything in front of y. So let's start over here. Here I've got y minus 3x equals negative 5. So what I do is I add 3x, I get y equals, remember, please put your x's first. That's really, really important, okay? Especially if you go to next year's course, there's going to be a real big emphasis on making sure your powers of x, because we could get more than just x to the first here, are in descending order, and they're all nicely in order, okay? Like imagine going to a library and the books are all out of order, right? You know, we think about alphabetically, if you had the A's and the C's, then the G's, then the B's, and the Z's, that would be really tough to organize. We're going to do a similar thing when we talk about these kinds of expressions as well. All right, so take a second, pause the video, try this next one, and then I'll show you how do we do this one. You're just getting y alone. All right, let's take a look. I now need to get y alone. So I subtract 4x, divide, or rather put my line there. I'm getting ahead of myself, right? Division is going to be the next step. Minus 4x, putting the x first, plus 30. Now I divide. Make sure, please, divide by everything. So I get y equals, the negatives cancel, so this becomes a 4/5 x. 30 divided by negative 5 is negative 6. Okay? In this case, it is okay to have a fraction because we're in slope-intercept form. So again, in slope-intercept form, fractions are okay. And this is giving us a slope of 4/5 and intercept of negative 6. Okay? Okay, so our last question, and again, if you need to rewind and check that again, go ahead. Our last question is this. This is a challenge to you. Find the equation of a line that passes through 4, 7, and negative 1, negative 8 in all 3 forms. Okay, so let's try this. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the slope, because you need to know the slope in order to be able to calculate the equation of a line that passes through 2 points, right? Hopefully you remember doing this in slope-intercept. So what I'm going to do is I want you to pause. I want you to try to calculate the slope, because we'll work together on this, and then I'll jump in and show you what the slope is. All right, here's how we do it. Now, you could make whatever you want your x1, y1, and whatever you want your x2, y2, but please label them. Notice how I'm labeling my x1, y1, and I'm very carefully labeling my x2, y2. Okay, I'm labeling those. Now, again, I could have flipped those around. That's fine. What's important is that you keep the 1, 1 and the 2, 2, and you label them correctly. So now here I go. I'm going to do my rise. The rise is the y's. So minus 8, minus 7. y2, y1, negative 1, minus 4. Now, if you did this the other way around, that is 100,000% okay. The only thing is, then you have to, these would be flipped around. So you have your 7, then your negative 8, your 4, then your negative 1. Just note that the negative 1 and the negative 8 are together, just like with the point, and the 7 and the 4 are together, just like with the point. Okay? So that's 2 things people do with slope. 1, they have their x's and their y's flipped around, so they do their run over their rise. 1. 2, they get the points flipped around. So it'd be like 8 and 7, 4, negative 1. See what I did? They don't put their x's with their y's. Okay, so now I do negative 8 minus 7, I'd get negative 15. Negative 1 minus 4, I'd get negative 5. If you did it the other way around, you would get 15 over 5, meaning my slope is 3. Okay, now I'm going to write it in 3 forms. I recommend, personally, you start with point-slope form. So I'm going to do point-slope form first. For point slope form, you can choose whatever one you want. I'll show you both. What I want you to do is pause the video, try to write it, and then in a second, I'll show you both of them. Alrighty, let's see both of them in action. So again, I'm going to use this point first. So I go y minus 7, because 7 will cancel this out, equals, drop my slope, x minus 4. So again, if I plug in 4, this becomes 0. If I plug in 7, this becomes 0. 0 equals 0. I'm in good shape. And remember, the point that you're plugging in is the only point that makes both sides equal to 0. So it's a quick check. What if we did the other one? Here I do y plus, you get to minus 8 equals 3x plus 1, because that is a minus, so I need to flip it to a plus. Now let's do the slope-intercept form. So again, what I want you to do, either take if you got it right on this step, okay, take whichever one was yours, convert it to slope-intercept form, okay? If you did not get it right, either fix yours so it looks like one of those, or choose one of those and convert it to slope-intercept form, and then in a minute, I'll show you how to do it. Okay, here's how we do it. Ready? So I'm going to go ahead and, again, distribute. So I'll do the first one first. 3x minus 12. Then I add the 7. Y equals 3x minus 5. Now I'll show you on the second one. So the second one looks like this. So first I distribute the 3. Y plus 8 equals 3x plus 3. Then I subtract the 8. I get y equals 3x minus 5. So you can see that these are equivalent to one another, and I can tell that because when I convert to slope-intercept, I get equivalent equations. That shows you that it does not matter what point you choose when given 2 points. Sometimes you might get the instruction, please use the first point. That might be more so that I can go boom, 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 and see if you got it. But it doesn't really matter what point you choose, so long as you choose a point that's on the line. Okay, finally, I want you guys, I'm going to write standard. Go ahead, take a second, try to convert to standard, and then we'll reconvene and we'll see if you're right. All right, here we go. Last but not least, standard form. So what I want to do is, here's my starting point, and I want to get the x and the y together on the same side. So what I do is minus 3x, minus 3x. Now remember, which letter do I put first? I put my x first. So I go negative 3x plus y equals negative 5. Or, depending on how picky people want to be, 3x minus y equals positive 5, right? Either way will work. I would accept either one because those are equivalent equations, okay? Those are equivalent to another. And, you know, we might have even seen this at some point in the video. Go figure. This might have been something we've already seen. But anyway, I hope you found this video to be informational. I hope it may have answered some questions you have. Just please keep working at it. You know, the problems are not easy, but what I believe is I believe in you strongly, and I know that you can do it, all right? So again, hope you found this to be informational. Just keep at it, keep loving math, and don't give up, and have a wonderful day.